important part. Okay.
Did you happen to turn your mic on yet?
I think I have it turned on. It looks like it's on. Hear me yet? Can you hear me now? All right. Excellent. So I have to make a note to edit out the first few minutes and start here. Okay. So if you remember from assignment 2, we have our static character. So right now I have my main character, and the way that we're representing our character and really everything within our 2D environment is using the sprite renderer. So in this case, I have a sprite that's just a stick figure that I drew, and so now we're going to now we're going to change this out from being a static sprite to using Unity's animation engine in order to play an animation. Bless you. So to do this, we need to have animations. And so if you remember, we had this Piskel app. So if you want to do this with pixel art, this is kind of a cool tool to do. Really, you have kind of different tools at your disposal, but this is really what I want to do is walk through how to take a series of sprites and chop them up to then represent that as the animation for our character. So I'm going to stick with, kind of the same. So I'm going to start, I guess, with just the idle animation. So I'm going to start, or really kind of keep with the same motif of my stick character. So, this is going to be a challenge trying to do it with a trackpad. See if I can erase. Okay. And so, if you remember for Piskel, what you can do is you can duplicate frames. You can see, on the right-hand side, kind of what the animation looks like. So right now, I'm just going to make just a simple 3-frame animation where our character just kind of flaps their arms about. So you can see I did not go to school for fine arts. Whoops. And then I'm going to go here, do that one, duplicate. All right. Actually, I'll just leave this one out. So now we have something that looks a little silly. But that's okay. That's kind of what I want for this example. So I'm going to go ahead and export this. And so when you export, you can choose kind of what your sprite sheet layout looks like. And so here I'm going to really just keep it as just one row of sprites. So I'm just going to set it as 4 columns and 1 row. So that should just keep it across like that. And so then you have the ability to download it. So I'm going to download this. So now I have it downloaded. And then I'm going to rename this idle. And then I want to copy this and put it into my project. Oops. Yes. So that actually might be easier to do. So instead of me trying to navigate.
When you make a spreadsheet, do you have to replace like the single spread you made with the character from the last assignment?
Yes. So what we're going to do is swap out, and I'll explain kind of why that's the case. But we are going to swap out the static sprite with this animated sprite. So here I have my animated sprites. So I'm just going to make a new folder. I'm going to call character. And put my idle sprite in there. Okay, so if I once I load it in, I can preview it, and you can see, it's broken up into the four separate frames. And so Unity will provide some import settings, so then you can choose how you want Unity to interpret this. So at the very top, you have the different texture types. So we have sprites, but it also goes into light maps, cursors, normal maps. For what we're doing, it's just going to be a sprite. Then where we need for sprite animations, because what we're going to do is, in a sense, chop up our sprite sheet into separate sprites, then have the character, or really have Unity play through those sprites. And so here we would change from single to multiple. And then what we can do is we can open up our sprite editor. And so saying unapplied import settings, do you want to apply those? Yes. And so the sprite editor, what this allows us to do is go through and chop up the sprite sheet to then give us our individual frames. And so in here you can have Unity automatically chop up the sprites for you. And so if you were to do that, you could say slice. And it's kind of hard to see, but it's trying to make this really tight. Like you can kind of see this white line around it. It's trying to make this really tight bounding box across the sprites. And so you can do that, but the problem is that as you change the sprites, if the sprites if they have different dimensions, then like whatever collision box or anything you have tied around that is going to fluctuate based upon the sprite that's being played. And so just for ease of use, we're just going to chop up the sprites so they're uniform. So I'm just going to say grid cell by size, and I know that these are 32 by 32. Pivot tells you kind of where the center point of the image will be, and so or the center point of the cut. So we're going to say at the center. And so now if you come back, you can see, it's maybe a little bit difficult to see, but there's this white line around the sprites. So it's moved. So it's now not trying to tightly encompass the sprite. It's now moved off to the side, or kind of it's uniformly distributed at say 32 by 32. So we'll keep it like this. So we'll just say apply. And now you can see that Unity it's gone through and chopped it up, and now has it saved out as four different images. So the next point is to do the animation. And so with Unity, if you come up to Window and Animation, you have these variety of choices: Animation, Animator, Animator Parameter. So for right now, we're just going to focus on Animation. And so I can bring what I need to do. So I guess with the animation window, what you're specifying in Unity is that you want to have a certain component or values of certain components changing over time. And so you don't necessarily have to tie an animation directly to, say, a sprite renderer. You can also tie it to kind of other components. But for right now, what I'm going to do is take Woody as our character. So it says to begin animating Woody, create an animator and animation clips. I'm going to say create. And so now it wants to create a new animation file. So I'm going to call this just idle, idle animation. So now idle animation is broken into, so it's created the animated file for me and the animation and the animator controller or animator. So I'll get into the animator a little bit later. But for right now, if I want to play with the idle animation, so the idle animation, so what we have here, this creates the what's called the dope sheet. And so in the dope sheet, what you're doing is you're establishing the keyframes that you need for your animation. So for those who've played with films or compressed films or compressed video files, you have keyframes that are put within the video file to then show how to translate from one keyframe to the next keyframe. So instead of trying to save every individual file, you just have these set of keyframes that do the translation. And so we're not doing anything that advanced with our 2D sprites. All we're really doing is we're going to set our keyframes just being the set of frames. So each image for our animation will be its own kind of keyframe. So I can set that. So if I, let's see. Whoops. That's not what I wanted to do. Whoops. Sorry. Okay, so I have so I have Woody highlighted here. So what I need to do, so if I want to create this animation, what I can do is I can start recording kind of the different actions that I want really kind of go through Unity and then kind of manually add the different parts of Woody I want to animate. And so if I start pressing record, then here I can add a property. And so here it shows me, here are the different properties of the character. And really what we're changing is the sprite animation. So if I come down to sprites, and so now it's highlighting to say you're wanting to change something here. And so what I can say is at the first keyframe, I'm going to set this to idle 0. And then I can move another keyframe. And then I can change it. Say I want that to be idle 1. And I can go through and add kind of the rest of these. So 2. 3. So I'm going to stop the animation, and then you can space these out. So if I start playing the animation, let's see. So you can see it's going through. Let's see, where did I change anything here? Oh, how did I get? I don't know why character is now disabled. I don't know what happened there. Let's remove that. So if I play, and so it's kind of barfing. So in this frame here, I'm going to remove that frame. So now when I play this, so now it looks a little bit better. And then you can change the sample rate. So for instance, since I only have 4 frames, oops, it's not going to save. And then if I want to, I can move this about. So I'm going to try to move this back. There we go. Moving a little bit slow. So say you have the ability to kind of play around with this, and you can add different frames. So I'm going to move this back to say 24. You see it's flying now. So I'll just leave it as this for now. If I go back to my game, so right now, because when I set up the character, or when I specified the character was the one I wanted to animate, it gave me the choice, or it created this animator along with the animation clip. So, so let's take a look at Animator. I'm going to close the animation window because it's going to make it a little too much. So Animator, what this constructs is a state machine. So I don't know. So how many folks here are familiar with state machines? Okay. So the state machine is a construct that we use in programming, but you can find it in a variety of different applications. Really, the idea of a state machine is that you specify within a state kind of what you want to happen at that point in time. And then you can make transitions to then show how to move from state to state. So kind of a simple example would be like a Coke machine. So a Coke machine, you have different states where it's asking for, say, I need $1. And then, so you can start putting coins in, and then as you put coins in, that transitions from one state to the next state. So if I put in a quarter, I've transitioned from I need $1 to I need 75 cents. And then if you put in another quarter, it transitions to 50 cents. And once you finally put in enough quarters, it then transitions to say, you have enough money, and now it's waiting to see which button you press. And then that transitions to, I'll give you a Coke. With the animation, what we're doing here is our states are going to be the animations that we're going to play at any point in time. And then the transitions are going to be what needs to be triggered in order to switch from one animation to the next. Now the Animator, this works for both 2D and 3D. So once you get into 3D, you'll get into facets of animation, especially for 3D models. If you're talking about blending 3D animations, doing inverse kinematics, those kind of things we're not going to cover in this course. If you're to take the advanced class, we talk a little bit more about how to utilize the Animator to blend those 3D animations together. In this case, we're treating everything as just this 2D sprite sheet that we're playing, and so we're just going to swap out one sprite sheet for the next sprite sheet to play. So right now, you have a state machine that has two states, and so every state machine that Unity constructs for the Animator starts with this entry, and so entry then transitions to the first state, with it in this case being the idle animation. So idle animation tells you which clip it is. So the clip that we created here, which animates our main character to follow this four frame animation. And then you can change the speed. So if you want to play faster or slower, you have the option of doing that. And so if I were to start playing the game, so I come in here and I start playing. So my character's kind of flapping around, and then here should be the idle animation. If I change, see, I might need to try to move this so you can see it playing. But if I try to slow down the animation, so now you can see the character's kind of slowed down. Likewise, if I really want to take off, now you can see little hummingbird arms. Yeah, a little much.
Well, if you had that you said the whole jumping where you go so high up in the sky would work.
Right. So, so anyway, so you can play around with the speed of the animations while you're doing that. So one thing I need to do, I need to create another kind of animation for running. So in this case, I am going to just do something. Say if I take my current animation, I'm going to just change it around a little bit. So again, apologies to all artists in attendance. I'm trying to take drawing classes, and this is as far as I've been able to get at this point. So, oops, I don't want to do that. So let's see. I gotta hit the erase tool. And just to make it a little less confusing, we'll just keep the arms kind of static. So we'll just move our character's arms. Oops. Erase that, duplicate. And so I can get rid of, oops. Okay, yeah, I'll just get rid of these two. So now we just have a two frame animation. So that's, I think, will work for demonstrate purposes. So again, I'm going to create a sprite sheet. I said you can organize the sprite sheet however you want. I think for 2D animations, especially for the number of frames that we're dealing with, probably just keeping it all in one row is fine. So I'm just going to have 2 columns of 1 row. I'm going to download that. So I'm going to come back, show in Finder, and I'm going to rename this one to Move. So again, I'm going to bring this into the project. So the easy way to do that, if I just copy or just move or drag the sprite sheet into Unity. So now it's copied over there. Now again, I'm going to break it up. So here for sprite mode, I'm going to go from single to multiple. And then it's going to ask me if I want to apply these settings. I'm going to say yes. And here I'm going to slice it, and I'm going to slice it manually. So I'm just going to specify 32 by 32. You can see that's where it divides it. So I'm going to apply that. So now I have this two frame animation, or just really just an image that's split up into 2. I now need to create the animation to go with that. And so what I can do for that, if I go to create, and here I'm going to create an animation, and I'm just going to call this my move animation. And then what I can do is open up the animation window. And so because I have, I'm going to drag this down here just to tie it in. So I have move animation, so that's the one that's brought up. So if I highlight our character, and so because there's already an animation tied to it, I need to change the clip. So yeah, I want to replace it. So now I'm going to go ahead and just add. So I hit record, and now I can add the different properties. So in here, I'm just going to move that into there. And so that creates the first keyframe. And then I'm going to create a second keyframe, saying add. and then if I come back, do that. And it's key to make sure you stop recording once you have your animation set, because if you keep recording, if you keep changing facets of your of the components, those get sucked into the animation. So in like I said, in animation, you can change, say you could change the position. If for some reason you want an animation where you you can keep resizing the character, you could do. And so in fact, I can kind of show what that would look like, but just to show the move animation running. So you can see that going through. I'm going to slow it down to, let's see, 24 frames a second. It's not. There we go. That looks a little runny. But to show you kind of a different way you can do animations, if I create another clip, let's say we just call this pulsing. And so you could do something where, so in this case, I have my character. I'm going to set the character scale back to 1. And when the pulsing animation is running, you could do something where it goes to, say, 2. And then maybe in the next frame goes to 3. And then back down to 2. And back down to 1. And really this is to demonstrate just different facets of the animation. So if I were to start playing it, now you get this weird pulsing effect.
Yeah. Looks like his head got disconnected from his body.
Yeah. So like I said, this is. So like I said, the animation or animations within Unity aren't explicitly tied to, say, what we're doing with the sprite sheet. You can create an animation based upon any of the components that are tied to your object. But now we have, I said, this idle animation and move animation. Now I want to incorporate that move animation into our controller. And so what that means is now I want to have a new state within our animator that represents the move. And so I'm going to create an empty state, and I'm going to rename it, call it move animation. And so every state, that adds 0. Every state requires an animation clip to go with it. So in this case, we're going to add our move animation with it. And so it's set to a speed of 1. So right now, let me make sure I get the... This isn't constructing. I don't know why it keeps adding that. Oh, I think it's probably trying to, because it feels it's maybe trying to step on what we already have for the animation. If I come back, so I move our animator here. Oops. Move this around. There we go. Okay. So here it has the move animation. Should be able to drag. You can just drag your animations into the animator. And so now I have this move animation. And so right now there's no connection between idle and move. So this is where this idea of transitions come into play. So we need to have a way to transition from the idle to the move and vice versa. And so if you right click on any of the states, you'll get this make transition. And so here the make transition is allowing you to connect to any state that you have out there. And so I'm going to connect it to our move animation. So if I click on the transition, it gives me some information. So here is right here it lists about an exit time. So if you want an animation to play out before you switch to the next one, you would say, yeah, you want to afford some exit time. Because we're just going to swap animations directly, we don't need an exit time. So we can just do that directly, or we can just take that out. Like I said, with transitions, we're not transitioning between them. So it should just, as soon as the idle animation is done, or as soon as we switch from one to the other, we should just immediately start playing the next one. So that establishes the link, but it doesn't set up what we need in order to get the state from. We need to have some indicator to recognize when to switch from one state to the next. And so the animators, what they provide are a set of parameters that you can specify that allow you to kind of identify values that you would need to set in order to say it's time to transition from one state to the next. And so you can think of parameters like public variables that are explicit to your state machine. And so in animators, you have four variable types. So you have floats, ints, bools. So these three you all should be familiar with. So floating point is just a decimal value. Integer is a whole number. Boolean can only be true or false. The fourth one is a trigger. And so what a trigger acts like a Boolean, but it has no state associated with it. So triggers just says once you set the trigger, at that point, then something needs to happen. So you're not checking for seeing whether or not it's set to true or false. You're just saying it's really just an event to say, okay, go ahead and do something with it. And so that'll come handy when we do things like jumps, where once somebody presses the key, we want to instantly go ahead and jump. For moving, we'll start with just putting in a float value, and we'll call it speed. And so what we'll do with this is we'll tie speed directly to the input value that we're using for the character. So right now, if you remember with the input, if you press the left button, the value gets set to -1. And if you press the right button, it gets set to 1. And then if you don't press any key at all, it stays at 0. So we want to hook into that for what we're doing with the move. And so here, now within each transition, we can give conditionals. So this ends up being kind of a conditional statement that's saying if these certain things are present, then we want the transition to transpire. So in our case, for the idle, so we want to go once the speed once we start moving, so if we're greater than 1, or let's say if we're moving going less than, or so if we're, sorry, if we're, in a sense, not 0, then we want the character to move. And you can see with the conditions for Booleans, you only get this greater than and less than. So they don't provide you an equality check. So we can just say if we're greater than 0, let's do something here. And so we'll leave it like this. And likewise, let's make this transition back. In fact, well, I changed my mind. So here, instead of saying 0, because we'll have it so you're having to move, like, because we're not dealing with thumbsticks, we're just dealing with the keys. If you have just a small value here, this will work out for us. And so, so I'm just going to put this at 0.1. And then likewise, I want to do something. So now I'm wanting to do this transition back from move to idle. So again, I want to set these things up so there's no exit time. And so there's really no transition. So I can set that 0. And so here, I want speed to be less than, say, 0.1. So by that, if it's at that speed, it shouldn't really be moving at all. And just want to make sure. I don't know why it keeps. There. So make sure that exit time is set to 0 for any of these transitions. And you don't necessarily need a fixed duration because we're not dealing with waiting for animations to play out. So now we have it set up where, so we should see a transition from idle to move when we get this when this condition's met, and likewise when we go from move to idle. But we need to hook in. We really need to be able to use our scripts, or really have the scripts be able to access the animator to then modify these public variables such that when it's checking the conditions, it knows to change from one to the other. So this is where we have to do a little bit of programming. So I'm going to come back to our character. I'm going to open up the character controller script. In the character controller script, some of this should already be established for you. So this line was commented out to start. It's this reference to the animator. So now that we have an animator tied to our character, we're going to go ahead and uncomment that. And then in the awake, uncomment this one. So what we're going to do is now grab the reference to the animator when we start. So now we can access the animator to be able to modify those parameters that are on the state machine. So here, what we can do, so here we have move, and so move, this is our check to see whether or not the player's wanting to move the character to the left or right, or just leave it stay still. And so because we want to have our speed in the animator just kind of mimic what we're doing with move, we can take the move value and use that for helping us set the speed parameter. So So within the animator, you have these different set functions. So this is so as you start typing um, in your IDE, either if you're using Model Develop or Visual Studio, it should provide you with functions that are available to whatever object you're accessing. And so set bool and set float. So this is the one that we want to use set float. Because what we do here with set float is we specify the name of the parameter that's a float, and then we give it the value that we want to set it to. So we were using speed as the name of the parameter. And now here we can set the value to what we want here. And so with how we're doing the check in Animator, we're just seeing if speed goes above 0. At that point, we're saying, okay, you're moving. And once you're below like 0.1, then you stopped. So that works okay if we're going right, but if we move left, now we're talking in negative values, and so we don't want to capture that. So we just want to keep everything in the positive. And so if you remember y'all remember absolute values from, okay, now you get to apply that knowledge of absolute values to the world of programming. So Unity provides a math library called math.f. And yep. And so in here, it has a variety of functions. And so ABS, that is absolute value. So whatever number you put in here, it's going to return the absolute value of it. So we want to have the absolute value of move put into here. So now this line should set the speed value to the absolute value of move. So if we're moving left or right, the value that's going to come out is going to be positive. So then that should trigger to let us know that we're wanting to do the move animation rather than the idle. So I'm going to let this thing build, and then we'll test to make sure this is going to work.
Now we're still going to continue this. We can work on this also on Thursday, right? Flow test? Or we work on something else?
We'll probably talk a little bit more about just 2D graphics in general. And then, oops, move that.
So Tuesday next week for sure, we can work on this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so if I start playing, so I have to kind of move in. It's a little hard to see. But you can see that I have the animator open, and it's moving through right now the idle animation. So right now, this is the only animation that can run. You can see my character flapping around, and the speed value is set to 0. So if I start moving the character, you should see So you can see it's playing the move animation, and then when I stop, it transitions back to the idle animation. And you can see on the left-hand side with the speed value, it
goes from where when you start moving, especially if you go back and forth, it goes from 0 to 1.0.
Right. So it's so because it's tied to our move value, it's going to.
And I think you're already. I think it just shows you're already running because of just the way it is. Just the way the legs are going. Yeah.
So anyway, so that gives you, I said that, so that walks you through just setting up a basic animator with 2 states. So the next portion of this we'll go through how to incorporate the jump, and so that will require adding another state, but then using using a different parameter than speed in order to get that going. But this should get you started with so kind of the most part of the assignment. We'll pick this up either Thursday or next Tuesday. So, all right. So that covers class for today.